Yes, ladies and gentlemen.
There is Friedrich Merz, who is about to become the next Chancellor of Germany. Of course, there will be coalition talks, as there always are, or tend to be in Germany, but warning there that this is the last warning, he said, to centralist parties
that we are faced with. And that's why we really see this result as a huge amount of trust, and we really have to justify this trust. We really need a political change, and that political change must come now. This election win was the first step, but now we need the second step. We must deliver. We understand this. That's true for the party office, but also for the parliamentary group. And so we will enter the talks with that in mind. I have to thank all our activists. This was a winter election campaign. There were many campaigners. They worked so hard every day, every night. Thank you ever so much for your commitment. And hopefully we can then also justify your hard work by bringing about the political change that we need in the next legislative period. Now, the questions. We've had lots of questions. Let's see. Mr. Blank, you were first. Yeah, I'm surprised that I was first as well. Mr. Merz, you telephoned Mr. Netanyahu last night. Have you already invited him here to Germany? And how can you make sure that he won't be arrested as a result of the ICC warrant? Indeed, we telephoned last night. He phoned me. He congratulated me. You know, we are well acquainted. And I said, yes, we should really meet very soon once we've formed a government. And if he is visiting Germany, then I guaranteed him that we'll make sure he can visit Germany and he can leave Germany without being arrested here. I think it's an absurd idea that an Israeli prime minister cannot visit the Federal Republic of Germany. He will be able to visit Germany. Mr. Drevis. Mr. Merz, one question regarding the transatlantic relationship. You expressed quite critical thoughts regarding the US government. You said you would have never thought that you would ever say this on German television, that you wanted independence from the USA. Does that mean that you've now given up on coming to a deal with Mr. Trump? That's something you said a few months ago. So have all the bridges been burned, or do you think there's still potential that we can actually come to some sort of agreement with the United States, especially in the area of defense? Thank you very much for your question. It is true. I never thought I would ever think, let alone say anything like this. But the signals we're getting from the USA seem to indicate that they are less and less interested in Europe. They are less interested in committing to Europe. But I still think that we can convince America that it is in both our interests to have a good transatlantic relationship. But it's always like this. You have to be prepared for the worst-case scenario. When those win the upper hand in America, who don't just say America first, but America alone, where if they win the upper hand, then it'll be difficult. But I'm still hopeful. We'll be able to maintain the transatlantic relationship. It is in our mutual interest. If this transatlantic relationship fails, then it will not only damage Europe, but it'll also damage the United States of America. That's why I will do everything in my power to make sure that we have and maintain a good transatlantic relationship. But it also means that we need to be united at the European level. I also telephoned Emmanuel Macron last night. He was already on his way to Washington. We talked about the subjects that he will raise with the American president, and I realized Macron's position is really identical to my position. Ms. Sievert. Thank you very much. Mr. Merz, I want to talk about the blocking minority. The AfD and the left have this blocking minority. How will you deal with that, especially if you are thinking about fiscal rules? Ms. Sievert, I can't answer that yet. I really regret that exactly that happened, which I had feared. Now we have a blocking minority in the German parliament. The extreme left and the extreme right have this blocking minority. Let's assume they make use of that blocking minority. If they only abstain, that would be enough, or if they vote against a particular proposal, then they would have this blocking minority. That means we wouldn't have the necessary majority to change the constitution or appoint judges to the constitutional court. But before I say any more, allow me to talk to the SPD and the Greens. The 20th Parliament of the Federal Republic of Germany is still in office until the 24th of March. So we still got 4 weeks. We can still think about all of this. But please, you will forgive me. I don't want to talk about this in public here. Mr. Rinke. Mr. Merz, I want to continue here, really. Mr. Habeck has already said, maybe, he said, you might be able to reform the debt brake with the Greens in this parliament. Did you just say you won't rule this out, depending on the talks, of course, with the SPD and the Greens? And another point, what is your concrete offer to the SPD? You said you are quite optimistic, you said you will come to some sort of agreement, but you would also need to offer something to them, I suppose. Well, first of all, we offer the SPD a good, constructive and trustworthy talks. And that means I won't speculate on all kinds of topics here in public now. We will have to assess exactly where we have things in common, where we can't come together. So we will start with a situational analysis. We will assess, have we got the same understanding of the challenges we're facing now? And that will be the starting point for everything that follows. The German parliament can still act at any time. That is different from the government, because the government always needs a parliamentary majority. But the German parliament, the Bundestag, can act even after elections. There is no rupture. I think that we've even decided on deploying armed forces after an election. So if we need to decide something, we can do that. If that should happen, well, that's something I need to talk about with the parties that are still in the old parliament. That's the Free Democrats, the Greens, and the Social Democrats. But once more, I don't want to speculate in public now. I want to wait until I've talked to everybody. Ms. Menken. Mr. Merz, a question regarding the election result in the former East Germany. You haven't won a single constituency there. What will you do now, especially now with regard to the regional elections in Saxony-Anhalt? Thank you very much for the question. We really thought very carefully about this in the party office as well. The colleagues in East Germany have exactly said what you put, as you put it now as well. We haven't won a singular constituency in We even had some constituencies who were orphaned, if you like. So we really provided extra support for those constituencies. We will need to continue to do that, but we also have to talk about the substantial points that led to this election result. I'm very worried about the situation there. Also, in the context of the coming regional elections, not just in Saxony-Anhalt, but also Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, we'll also have elections in Berlin. That's also another topic here in this context, especially in the east part of the capital. Also, a lot of voters have now voted for the far left. But at the moment, it's too soon to draw lessons and conclusions, but you can assume that we will be thinking very hard about these points. The transatlantic relationship, the relationship with Russia, our position vis-à-vis Ukraine, all those are very important topics here. But I really want to make sure we talk to everybody first. But yes, we are worried what is happening now in the former East Germany. And our colleagues in the East are telling me we are only a few years ahead of you. If you don't solve the problems, then you will probably be in the same situation we are in now. So we really need to solve the problems that are at the moment the fuel for the AfD. Mr. Pleitgen.
Okay? Go ahead. Right. Thank you. So you spoke about some of the concerns that you have about the Trump administration. Sir, how do you want to position Germany as far as the United States is concerned to prevent confrontations with the Trump administration for Germany, for Europe? And how concerned are you about Donald Trump's efforts at rebuilding relations with Russia to the detriment of both Europe and Ukraine?
Ja, Herr Pleitgen, Sie erlauben, dass ich auf Deutsch antworte.
Mr. Pleitgen, please allow me to answer in German. I am quite concerned about what we're hearing from Washington, especially in recent days. But I personally don't think that this will be the final word. I can also hear voices from the Congress. They are different. There are many Americans who are rather critical of the current direction of the American government. So what is important is that here on the European side, we come to a united position regarding the topics that need to be raised. One example, the trade policy. Trade policy is European, it's not done at a national level, and there's no possibility that the member states will be treated differently when it comes to tariffs. Europe will talk and speak with one voice and one voice only. The same is true for NATO. At the end of June, we'll have a NATO summit in Den Haag, The Hague. Up until then, it needs to be clear how the transatlantic relationship continues to develop. And then we also must be clear what contribution Europe can make in order to maintain our defense. And I'm still hopeful. The Americans will recognize their own self-interest, and they will recognize that it's important to remain committed to Europe. And we are, of course, also worried about the attempts to come to a deal with Russia without any input from Ukraine or Europe. That is unacceptable for Ukraine, but also for Europe. Next question. A lady in the second row, please.
May I ask also in English? It's easier. Do you think NATO still functions at the moment? And in case when American soldiers leave eastern flank of NATO, will German soldiers stay there?
I am convinced that NATO is still functioning well. At the Munich Security Conference, I also had a personal conversation with Mark Rutte, the NATO General Secretary. Mark Rutte has probably got one of the most important roles in our transatlantic relationship. I know Mark Rutte and Donald Trump also have a good personal relationship. So I am hopeful, and I am sure that the transatlantic relationship will be maintained even within NATO. And I'm also very satisfied that the UK is now getting closer to the European continent, and they also want to make their contribution to the European pillar of our defense here. So I am absolutely confident that we will be able to manage the situation. And of course, in Lithuania, we've got a German brigade, so Lithuania is well prepared. My political group has always supported that. I've also visited Lithuania, visited the brigade where the German brigade is now being set up. So this commitment will remain, and we will build on it. Mrs. Küffner.
Mr. Merz, from where you're standing right now today, what is your message to Donald Trump?
Our message is clear and simple. We are very interested as Europeans to maintain a good relationship with America. We see ourselves still as a partner. We see America as an important part of NATO. Europe is also an important part of NATO. We are in a political alliance. It's not just a military alliance, it's a political alliance. We have a shared understanding what an open society is, freedom, democracy, a market economy. I would hope that we keep sharing this shared understanding and that we can build on our relationship on this basis. Mr. Beumann. Mr. Merz, you defined a few points in the with regard to the immigration topic. You said these are points that are non-negotiable. Is it true also for the economic policy? That's one question. And another point, you said the election campaign also mobilized the far left. So the asymmetrical demobilization of Angela Merkel maybe had an advantage as well. Well, her approach had advantages at the time, but even at the time, I was skeptical, I must say, because I've seen how the election turnout decreased year on year. Now we've had a really high election turnout. That's good. That shows that we've got a vibrant democracy. In 1972, we had the highest turnout. We had a 90% turnout. We have now a turnout of what, 82.5%. So that's a good signal for our democracy. We had a very intense political debate, and that's something I welcome. In this debate, we saw a huge interest in politics, which we hadn't had for a long time. That is something that I'm delighted with. So we mobilized a lot of our base, but of course it also mobilized other parties. Fair enough. But another 3 million voters for the Conservatives. Yeah. We talked a few years ago that we had to gain an extra 2 million voters compared to 2021. Now we've actually gained 3 million new voters. So that's a success for us. Economic policy, yes. Well, I would put it like this. We have to do everything in our power in order to boost the competitiveness of our economy and really avoid anything else. The citizens' money or benefit, that's something we need to reform. It can't stay the way it is. I'm sure the Social Democrats will recognize that as well. There was an attempt to put forward a proposal, but that didn't go through the coalition. But there are also other topics. For example, the energy policy. We need to bring down energy prices, but we can't just subsidize people or prices. We need to have more. We need to generate more power. So we need more gas power plants, for example. That everybody agrees. The question is just where and when. Now, hopefully, I think we can come to some sort of agreement with the Social Democrats, because the Social Democrats in North Rhine-Westphalia are very interested because they want to make sure that we continue to generate our own energy. Anything else leads to deindustrialization. So if the Social Democrats really think about their core voters, these are the workers, and they ran away from the SPD and they came to us and the AfD. So if the SPD really thinks about their own core voters, then they should be following us on our way here. Ms. Hamburger. Mr. Merz, you've mentioned the meeting with Olaf Scholz regarding the interim phase. What would you expect? That he takes you into all the meetings that he goes into, or would you expect him to simply inform you about his meetings with foreign leaders? Well, the expectation is simple. We will now work together in order to make sure that we have a smooth transition. So we don't want the federal government to make decisions that are permanent without our input. That's true also for personnel decisions. We've also sent a memorandum of understanding to the current government. These are the points that are important for us, while in order to make sure we can work together even in the interim phase. Another question, last row. Another question regarding the AfD. Mr. Merz, you said you want to take the fuel away from the AfD. And does it? What about nuclear power? Do you think you want to revive that? I don't think that that nuclear power is the main topic, and that wasn't the reason why so many people have voted for the AfD. The main points are immigration and the economy, and on those topics we need to work, and here we need solutions. The energy generation is, yes, one partial aspect, but we all know power plants can't be switched on and switched off again, just like a bedroom light. We need to come to a moratorium. Do we then commission new nuclear power plants? I mean, that's something we still need to talk about. Mr. Haug. A question, blocking minority and two-third majority. Mr. Frey said this morning the government income is sufficient. Mr. Frey said this. That would be enough for defense spending as well. Now, what are your plans up until the 24th of March, you said, I think. Are you planning to give the government more fiscal room for maneuver, debt break, or more funds? Well, we haven't really finalized our thoughts on this. I want to hear what the Greens, the Free Democrats, and the SPD think about this before we make any decisions. We all know the German armed forces will require far more funding in the next few years. How we do that, that's something we need to discuss. My colleague, Mr. Frey, I agree with his assessment. We need to make the most of the money that we get. So we've got 1 trillion tax income, 1 trillion, that's almost 25% of our GDP. So we've got a lot of financial firepower, but that's something we need to talk about with the other parties. Another question. You have won the elections, and the industry really is counting on you. They really want some European rules to be reformed as well. Will you fight for industry here? Well, to be honest, we need to really have several goals in mind. The chemical industry has always been strong in Germany. Unfortunately, the footprint has decreased in recent years, but the regulation of the plastic production, that is something that is already being reviewed in Europe, and that's why I always think we can do both. We need to make sure that our industry is competitive, but at the same time, we need to preserve our environment, and there's no contradiction here. Ms. Adler. I will ask my questions in English. And maybe you can give me an answer in English as well.
Mr. Merz, you said that you spoke to Emmanuel Macron last night. When will you be speaking to the UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer? And what can you tell him and Mr. Macron? You say that defence in Europe has to be boosted and fast. What will you be doing in Germany to boost defence for the rest of Europe? Because your European partners will be looking at you.
Sie erlauben mir trotzdem, dass ich auf
Please allow me to answer in German. You understand German very well, so allow me to answer in German. I've spoken to Mr. Starmer several times by phone in the last few weeks. Also last week after the Munich Security Conference, I told him that I welcome the fact that the UK is now seeking to get closer to the European Union. I also welcome that Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron have now traveled to Washington together. Because of the German election campaign, the German chancellor couldn't be part of this. I hope that in the future, the German chancellor will then be able to actually also lead talks like that. I would also always involve our neighbor in the East. Donald Tusk in Poland is an important partner when it comes to strategic questions. And the message must be clear. Europe is united. And that is the precondition for everything. Here, some European countries need to lead. To expect that 27 member states agree with everything, that is not realistic. But there are a lot of countries, not just the big countries, there are also smaller countries, the Baltic states, for example. We need to define and determine our common shared strategic position, and that must be the foundation for our policies. And I'm sure that this will be done, because it's really 5 to midnight for Europe. We've got 4 more questions. Ms. Schupelius. Mr. Merz, I want to talk about the immigration stop. It was said that is a must. Do you still support that, or are you flexible there on that point? Well, even here I am very optimistic and confident. And I said yesterday on television as well. In the coalition treaty in the region of Brandenburg, here we've got SPD leadership, but there is a similar phrasing. It's about the border controls and to keep people out at the border. And I have to say one thing clearly. Nobody wants to close the borders. Nobody wants to do that. Although some claims like this were made during the election campaign. Nobody wants to close the borders, but we need to protect our borders better. We need to regain control and make sure we know who's coming into our country. And for constitutional reasons and European law reasons, it is necessary to make sure to give us the opportunity to refuse people at the border for a certain amount of time. Because as from 2026, we have our common asylum policy, but that's only until that's in 2026. So we still got more than 1 year until this really takes effect. So it's important that we act here, and I'm sure the Social Democrats will also accept that we need to find a common solution. Mr. Dahl. Mr. Merz, you said you will talk to the Social Democrats. You didn't mention the Greens. Will you not talk to the Greens at all? Nothing? Well, Mr. Dahl, in the interim phase, of course, I will, of course, talk also to the Greens and the Free Democrats. But there is no way we need the Greens to form a government, so we don't need to start coalition talks, because we can't possibly form a government with the Greens. So the priority is clearly on the Social Democrats, but of course we will still talk with all other political groups in Parliament. Yes, that's clear. Well, you know, we have, together with the SPD, we have 328 votes in Parliament. That's a clear majority. Yeah, we've also had a situation where we had where we only had a majority of 4 seats. Now we've got a majority of 17 seats, so I'm sure that'll work. Mr. Strauss. Mr. Merz, I'd like to know, did Angela Merkel congratulate you? And if not, would you have liked to have heard from her? And second point, have you already talked to people regarding your cabinet? Maybe give us some insights. Well, up until now, I have not received congratulations from Angela Merkel, but it's also possible that I just didn't notice it because I received a few hundred messages yesterday. And now regarding the cabinet and the personnel, there is a fake DPA piece of news, 9:17 this morning, apparently. It was said that we already talked in the party office about the cabinet. The truth is we haven't talked about staffing at all. It's far too soon for that. So thank you very much for the question, but I can only emphasize that we are not talking about staffing at the moment. And Ms. Lau, the last question. One question, Mr. Merz. The CSU also didn't quite meet the expectations. The AfD also doubled their vote share in Bavaria. What does it tell us about the election strategy? Well, good news from Bavaria is the Freie Wähler, they haven't really made any inroads. They haven't won a single constituency. But the bad news is that even in Bavaria, the AfD got stronger. Even in my constituency, in the Catholic Westphalian constituencies in the Rhineland, there we always used to have a big distance to the AfD. But even here, the gap has closed a little bit. So we need to deal with this phenomenon, with this challenge. But it is true for Bavaria, but also North Rhine-Westphalia and the Rhineland. We simply need to solve the problems of this country. We need to remove the fuel from that party. Ms. Weidel and her party, the AfD, are not interested in solutions. It's a party that simply feeds off the problems and an exaggeration of the description of these problems. So it is our task to counter that. That's only possible if and when we solve the problems, and if we can regain the trust of the voters in the democracy and the parties. This might be our last chance, the last legislative period. If we can't manage that in this legislative period, then we won't have another normal change of government in 2029, and then we'll have completely different problems. So that's why you see that that's why I'm so determined to find solutions together with the Social Democrats. I know that'll be difficult in some areas, but I think the Social Democrats will also recognize for themselves this is necessary because the Social Democrats are very close to an existential crisis. And I have to make that absolutely clear. As a Democrat in Germany, I have no interest in the SPD being destroyed. I want a strong SPD in Germany, which can really integrate people into the center-left space, just as we do it in the center-right space. That is our responsibility as a centrist parties, and we really need to meet that challenge. Thank you ever so much. Have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.